So tomorrow your I Am What I Am rough draft is due. Remember, this is just a rough draft. It doesn't have to be perfect, and you only need to make it perfect if you want to use it for your portfolio. So one of the things that you might consider doing this evening or in class tomorrow actually is playing around with your organization. If you pull out that first example that I gave you, the one by Rosario Morales, you'll notice that her poem looks like a big, thick rectangle all the way down the page. And her first part is longer than her second parts. And we talked a little bit in class, and we have on our guidelines poster for an I Am What I Am that there's a little bit of momentum to her piece. That first bigger stanza, that's what you call them in poems, those groupings are called stanzas in poems, it feels rambling. It feels like she's just thinking one thought after the other. And then those last two are a little bit more organized. The content of those last two stanzas is unified. Like everything in that stanza matches. It goes together. So that's something that you might want to think about. What details are you going to group in each stanza of your I Am What I Am poem? Do you want some of it to sound rambling and then move into organized, or do you want to flip-flop that around? Start with some organization and move into rambling. Or maybe you don't want to ramble at all. Maybe you want the whole thing to be coherent and succinct, and each stanza is tied together. So I want you to just start thinking about what it's going to look like on the page, okay? A couple of other suggestions that I have. You looked at mine in class earlier in the week, and you remember that mine looks a little bit more like paragraphs than it does a poem. It's still poetic because it's using metaphor, and it doesn't have a plot. But I wanted mine to be definitely more of a prose poem, so I made mine look like paragraphs. And if you remember, it starts with all of the stuff about growing up in my small town and what it really felt like to not fit in there because of being in love with Jeremy. And then in the middle, it moves on to what life was like after I was made to break up with Jeremy. And then finally, that third stanza, everything in it is about just wanting to move on. So I worked really hard to make sure that the content of each one of my stanzas was coherent, that everything in it went together, that it matched, okay? So I want you to think about that. And remember, mine looks like paragraphs. Another possibility is to make it look like an actual poem where you actually do some line breaks and you make it look a little thinner and you do some double spacing and you just kind of pay attention to the order of things as you go down, okay? So one of the things you can do if you start to look at some line breaks, if you want your poem to look like this, one thing that you can do to help yourself organize it is to actually cut it up line by line. And I'm just going to do some cutting right here. I'm going to cut out the poem, cut all the white space off, and then I'm just going to cut it up so I have all of these little strips. So you'll want to double space, all right, so you have a little bit of room to cut in between each line. And I'm just going to give you an example of 3. So you have each one of your lines, on a separate sheet of paper. And then you can spread these all over your desk at home or around your bedroom floor, and you can just kind of play with, okay, this one needs to go up here, but I think this one needs to go down at the bottom. And you just keep moving these paper strips around, around until you get your poem exactly like you want it, okay, in the order that you want it. So that's just kind of a little practice thing that you can do. So tomorrow in class, I want you to be thinking about organization. We're going to give you plenty of time to play around with all three of these kinds of organizations. Do you want it to look like Rosario Morales's? Do you want it to look like mine? Or do you want it to look like this? And if it looks like this, you might play around with cutting it up into paper strips and moving it around on your table and really thinking about organization, the best organization for it. Okay? See you tomorrow.